Muharram, a month whose name is known by every Muslim. Yet if you ask most people today what the true story of Muharram is, why this month holds such a special place in Islamic history, and why it continues to be remembered with reverence, sacrifice, and reflection, many would only be able to mention a few events. But the reality is far deeper than that. Muharram is not merely a date on a calendar. It is not just a memory of the past. It is not only a story of grief. It is a mirror through which every Muslim can examine faith, character, loyalty, and the choices that define a lifetime. Think about it for a moment. Throughout history, countless months have come and gone. Empires have risen and fallen. Entire civilizations have disappeared without a trace. Yet some moments are so powerful that they refuse to fade away. They survive centuries. They cross borders, cultures, and generations. Muharram is one of those moments. It is a sacred month chosen by Allah among the 4 sacred months mentioned in Islam. This honor was not given to every month. When Allah grants a special status to a period of time, it means that the lessons hidden within it are meant to guide humanity far beyond that era. But this raises an important question. Is Muharram important only because of Karbala? Or was this month already honored long before those events took place? And if so, what made Muharram so special in the first place? To answer these questions, we must travel back through history and uncover a story that begins long before the tragedy that most people associate with this month. Islamic tradition tells us that Muharram has always been a month connected to divine mercy, sacred events, and spiritual significance. Yet the greatest lesson of Muharram is not found in dates or historical records. It is found in a single powerful principle: steadfastness. The world often measures success through wealth, influence, and power. Muharram teaches a different standard. Teaches that true success belongs to those who remain loyal to truth even when standing alone. Today, whenever the moon of Muharram appears, millions of hearts experience a unique feeling. Some turn toward worship and seek closeness to Allah. Others remember the events that shaped Islamic history forever. And many begin asking questions. What really happened during Muharram? Why do scholars and historians continue discussing it centuries later? What lessons are hidden within its story that remain relevant even today? To understand that, we must enter a period when the Muslim world stood at a critical crossroads. On the surface, everything seemed stable. Cities flourished. Trade expanded. The Muslim state appeared strong. But beneath that appearance, another battle was unfolding. It was a battle not fought first with swords, but with principles. It was a struggle between truth and convenience, between integrity and ambition, between faith and worldly power. This is where the message of Muharram becomes truly extraordinary. Muharram does not teach us that believers will never face hardship. Rather, it teaches us how believers should respond when hardship arrives. Every generation faces its own tests. Sometimes it means speaking the truth when silence would be easier. Sometimes it means sacrificing personal gain for a greater purpose. Sometimes it means standing firm while others choose comfort over conviction. That is why Muharram is not merely a historical event. It is a living lesson that speaks to every age. The names and places may belong to the past, but the challenges remain the same. The conflict between truth and falsehood did not end centuries ago. It continues in different forms in every era. And because of that, the lessons of Muharram never grow old. Yet another question remains. Who were the people whose actions transformed Muharram into one of the most remembered chapters in Islamic history? What kind of faith allowed them to make decisions that would echo through the centuries? How did a relatively small group become a symbol of courage, loyalty, and sacrifice for generations of Muslims around the world? As we continue this journey, we will discover that this story is about much more than a battlefield. It is not simply a tale of conflict. It is a story about loyalty when betrayal seemed easier. It is a story about faith when fear surrounded every path forward. It is a story about individuals who understood that honor is not measured by numbers, wealth, or political power. True honor comes from remaining faithful to Allah regardless of the cost. The deeper we explore Muharram, the more we begin to understand why its message continues to touch hearts centuries later. Some people appeared victorious in the eyes of the world, yet history remembers them differently. Others seemed to lose everything they possessed, yet their names became immortal. This contrast lies at the heart of Muharram's enduring power. Perhaps that is the greatest secret hidden within this sacred month. Real victory is not always visible in the moment. Sometimes success is written not by those who dominate the world, but by those who refuse to abandon truth. Sometimes the people who appear defeated become the very people who change history forever. And as our story unfolds, we will encounter moments of courage, sacrifice, heartbreak, and unwavering faith. We will witness choices that altered the course of Islamic history and left lessons that remain just as relevant today as they were centuries ago. Because Muharram is not merely about remembering the past. It is about understanding what it truly means to stand for truth when the cost of doing so seems greater than anyone can bear. Ye first section Ha. To truly understand Muharram, we must first understand how Islam itself defines sacred time. In the Quran, Allah speaks of 12 months in a year, and among them 4 are chosen as sacred. These are not ordinary divisions of time. They are periods in which sins carry greater weight, and good deeds carry greater reward. They are months where believers are reminded to be especially conscious of their actions, their intentions, and their relationship with Allah. Muharram stands among these 4 sacred months, and its name itself carries meaning. Muharram comes from the word meaning forbidden or sanctified. In the Islamic tradition, this refers to the prohibition of war and injustice during this time in its original divine order. It is a month meant for peace, reflection, and spiritual discipline, not chaos, not corruption, not oppression. But what makes Muharram unique is not only its status, it is the way it opens the Islamic year. It is the first month of the Hijri calendar. This means every new Islamic year begins not with celebration or entertainment, but with reflection. It begins with a reminder that time is not random. It is sacred. And every passing year is another opportunity to realign one's life with truth. Long before the events of Karbala, Muharram was already a month of spiritual significance. Islamic history records moments where prophets and righteous people observed fasting in this month as a sign of gratitude to Allah. One of the most well-known traditions associated with Muharram is the day of Ashura, the 10th day of the month. It is a day marked by remembrance and gratitude, a day connected to mercy and divine salvation in earlier generations. But over time, as centuries passed, humanity began to forget the deeper meaning of sacred time. Ritual slowly replaced reflection. Dates were remembered, but lessons were not always understood. And yet, Allah preserved certain moments in history that would force humanity to remember again. Moments so powerful that they would revive the meaning of sacrifice, truth, and unwavering faith. Muharram became one of those moments. Because while this month was already sacred by divine decree, history would later place within it an event so profound that it would forever redefine how Muslims across generations perceive patience, loyalty, and standing for truth. The stage had been set long before the tragedy unfolded. The foundation was already built, and when the test finally arrived, it would reveal the difference between those who understand faith as words and those who live it as a reality. As we move forward, we begin to approach a turning point in Islamic history. A time when leadership, morality, and truth would be tested in ways the Muslim world had never experienced before. A time when silence would be questioned and speaking out would come at the highest possible cost. And this is where the story of Muharram begins to shift from sacred background into living history. As the early generations of Islam passed, the Muslim world expanded rapidly. Territories grew, wealth increased, and political systems became more complex. What began as a message of faith, simplicity, and justice had now become a vast civilization stretching across continents. But with expansion came change. And with change came trials. Leadership in the Muslim world was no longer just about guidance and justice. It had also become tied to politics, inheritance, and power. Different interpretations of authority began to emerge. And slowly, the balance between spiritual responsibility and worldly rule began to shift. It was in this atmosphere that a major turning point arrived. A new era of leadership emerged. One that would deeply divide opinion among the people. Some saw it as political continuity. Others saw it as a departure from the principles they had known. Questions of justice, responsibility, and moral integrity began to surface more loudly than ever before. And at the center of this changing world stood individuals whose decisions would shape history forever. Among them was a man whose name would become inseparably linked with one of the most critical moral tests in Islamic history, a ruler whose authority represented a new phase in governance, and whose action would become the subject of debate, reflection, and historical analysis for centuries to come. At the same time, another figure was quietly becoming known not for political power, but for something entirely different. A man defined by his closeness to the Prophet's family, his knowledge, his dignity, and his deep commitment to preserving the principles of Islam as he understood them. He was not seeking conflict. He was not pursuing authority. But he also did not believe in remaining silent in the face of what he perceived as deviation from justice. Two paths were slowly moving toward a point of unavoidable tension. One represented established authority. The other represented moral conviction. And between them stood a community watching, uncertain of what the future would bring. This was not yet a battlefield. There were no swords drawn, no armies marching, no final confrontation had taken place. But beneath the surface, the conditions for a historic test were forming. Every society reaches moments where silence becomes a choice, and every choice carries consequences. This was one of those moments. What makes this period so important is not just what happened, but what it reveals about human nature. Because history is not only shaped by kings and leaders, it is shaped by the decisions of people when pressure rises, when truth becomes difficult, when comfort and conviction stand on opposite sides. And as we move further into the story, we will reach the moment where words turn into action, where disagreement turns into separation, and where Muharram transforms from a sacred month in history into a symbol remembered for generations. Because some events do not stay in the past. They become lessons for the future.